Okay, so let's talk about a name that everyone knows but maybe doesn't really know. Sigmund Freud. I mean, this guy is one of the most influential and, yeah, super controversial thinkers in all of history. Today, we're going to try and unpack his big ideas, what he thought really makes us tick. We're talking hidden desires, those deep-down conflicts, all the stuff that shapes who we are.
I bet you've heard these terms thrown around, right? Somebody makes a Freudian slip, or you talk about someone's huge ego, or the idea of our unconscious mind. These words are just part of our culture now. We use them all the time. But what did Freud actually mean when he came up with them? That's what we're going to do. Peel back the layers and see what's really going on.
All right, so to really get a handle on his theories, I think we've got to take a quick look at the man himself. You know, his life and the world he lived in. That's really where all these wild, revolutionary ideas came from.
So Freud's life, wow, it spanned this period of just massive change. He started out as a medical doctor in Vienna, pretty standard stuff. But then 1900 hits, he publishes The Interpretation of Dreams, and everything changes. That was the game changer. And his story ends in London after he had to flee the Nazis in 1938. So it's this incredible journey from being a doctor treating the body to becoming a cartographer of the mind. And that's just so key to understanding his work.
And that brings us right to the heart of it all. This is where, love him or hate him, you have to admit Freud's genius really shines through. He came up with this completely new map, a map of the human mind. And his central argument? That most of what drives us, most of what makes us us, is totally hidden deep, deep beneath the surface.
And right at the center of that map is this one massive concept, the unconscious. Now, for Freud, this wasn't just, stuff we forgot. Not at all. He saw it as a dynamic, super active part of our mind. Think of it like this hidden reservoir, just brimming with our most basic wishes, our deepest fears, and all those painful memories we've tried to push away. And the crazy part? Even though they're hidden, they are still powerfully pulling the strings of our everyday lives.
The way Freud explained this is just brilliant, and you've probably heard it before. He used the metaphor of an iceberg. What we're actually aware of, our conscious thoughts, that's just the tiny, tiny tip you see sticking out of the water. The real action, the vast, massive, unseen chunk of ice below the surface, that's the unconscious. And according to Freud, that's what's really steering the ship.
So let's break that down. Freud saw the mind in 3 levels. First, you've got the conscious. Super simple. It's whatever you're thinking about right this second. Then there's the preconscious. I like to think of this as your mind's waiting room. It's all the memories you can easily call up if you need them. But the real showstopper, the main event, is the unconscious. This is the locked-down, high-security part of your mind that Freud believed holds all the keys to our deepest anxieties, our darkest desires, the whole shebang.
Okay, so if all this stuff is going on under the surface, how does it actually work? Well, Freud imagined this constant, epic battle between 3 forces inside of us. First up, you've got the id. Just picture your inner toddler. It's pure instinct, running on the pleasure principle. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. Then, on the other side, you've got the superego. This is like your internal parent, or maybe a strict judge. It's your conscience, your moral compass, totally shaped by society's rules. And who's stuck in the middle playing referee? That's the ego. It's the rational part of you running on the reality principle, just desperately trying to give the id a little of what it wants without getting in huge trouble with the superego, or, the real world. And this constant tug of war? For Freud, that's where all our anxiety comes from.
So that's the structure of the mind, right? The id, ego, superego, the whole setup. But how does it get that way? Well, according to Freud, our adult personalities are basically set in stone by what happens to us in the first few years of our lives.
And this is where things get really controversial. In fact, this is probably Freud's most famous and most criticized theory. He said that we all pass through 5 psychosexual stages of development. Each stage is focused on a different part of the body where that pleasure-seeking energy from the id is concentrated. And here's the kicker. Freud believed that if a kid's needs were either ignored or maybe too indulged at any of these stages, they could get stuck or fixated, and that fixation would have a huge, lasting impact on their adult personality.
So what does that fixation actually look like when you're a grown-up? Well, someone with an oral fixation might be super dependent, always expecting other people to take care of them. An anal character, maybe someone who went through really strict toilet training, could end up being incredibly stubborn and orderly, or maybe even stingy.
The end goal, in Freud's view, was to get through all these stages without any major hang-ups and become what he called a genital character, which is basically his ideal for a mature, well-adjusted adult who can handle both love and work.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got this constant war raging inside us between the id and the superego, and it's creating a ton of anxiety. So what does the ego do? How does it even cope with all that pressure? Well, it develops this amazing arsenal of powerful, unconscious tools to protect itself.
These are what Freud called defense mechanisms. And honestly, the best way to think about them is as the ego's personal security detail. They operate totally automatically, completely unconsciously, and their job is to bend and distort reality just enough to take the edge off our stress and anxiety. And the thing is, we all use them every single day.
Let's run through a few of the most common ones. You've got repression, which is kind of the big one. It's where your mind just shoves a painful thought or memory deep into the unconscious so you don't have to deal with it. Then there's projection. That's when you have an unacceptable feeling, like anger, but instead of admitting it, you accuse someone else of being angry. We've all seen displacement, right? That's when you have a terrible day at work, you can't yell at your boss, so you come home and kick a toy. A much healthier one is sublimation. That's channeling those unacceptable impulses into something productive, like taking out your aggression in sports. And finally, good old rationalization. That's just our amazing ability to come up with perfectly logical-sounding excuses for things we did for totally illogical reasons.
So the really crucial thing to get here is that these defenses aren't necessarily bad, not at all. Their number one job is to protect us, to shield our ego from being overwhelmed by anxiety. The real trouble starts, according to Freud, when we lean on them too much, when they become so automatic that they create this permanent wall between us and what's actually going on.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. 100+ years later, what's the verdict on Freud? I mean, his ideas completely changed how we think about ourselves, but man, have they also faced some serious, intense criticism.
And what's so fascinating is that some of the sharpest attacks came from right inside his own camp. Guys like Alfred Adler and Carl Jung, who were his close colleagues, eventually broke away. They basically said, hey, Sigmund, this obsession with childhood sexual conflicts is just way too narrow. Adler thought the main human drive was the struggle for power. Jung, on the other hand, talked about creative urges and this mystical idea of a collective unconscious that we all tap into.
So what's the modern verdict? Well, scientifically, let's be honest, a lot of Freud's very specific theories, especially those psychosexual stages, they just don't hold up to testing. There's not a lot of hard, empirical evidence. But, and this is a huge but, his influence is just undeniable. It's everywhere. He literally gave us a new language for talking about our inner lives. Ego, repression, Freudian slip. He's the reason we accept that our childhood matters, and he's the one who first made us seriously question if we're really the rational masters of our own minds.
So in the end, we're left with this puzzle. Who was Sigmund Freud? Was he a true scientist, like a Columbus of the mind, discovering hidden continents within us? Or was he more of a brilliant storyteller, a myth maker, who created this incredibly powerful and compelling story about who we are, a story that might not actually be provable? That debate is still raging today, and maybe, just maybe, that's his real enduring legacy.